Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Refocusing Family Engagement, 7 Shifts for Engaging Families as Partners in Young People's Success. I'm Janice Hosteger. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at Succe Institute. And first of all, I just want to make sure everybody can see the screen and hear okay. So if you want to chat, place a message in the chat box to let us know if we can hear you, or if you can hear us, rather. Okay. Okay, like I said earlier, I'm Janice Hosteger, the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Succe Institute. I'm joined today by Mary Schrader in the chat box, and she's our Client Relationship Manager, and by our presenter today, Dr. Jean Rocca-Partain, our Vice President of Research and Development. We know your time is very valuable, so we hope to keep today's webinar within an hour. If you have questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so keep your questions handy, or go ahead and enter them in the chat box during the broadcast. We'll get started in just a minute, but first a few housekeeping notes. We will be recording the webinar today, and we'll send out the recording probably tomorrow, so if you missed something, we've got you covered. And we also have a facilitation guide that we put up in the chat panel, so you can go ahead and download that. And that will let you kind of follow along on the good things that Jean has for us today. Finally, we have a giveaway today, and we'll be giving away 3 copies of the book, Engage Every Parent. And if you want to be in on that drawing, stay till the end of the webinar, and we'll draw 3 names from the attendees at that point. So now I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Jean Rocca-Partain. As I said earlier, Jean's our Vice President of Research and Development here at Succe Institute. Since joining Succe 26 years ago, Jean has contributed to the organization's groundbreaking work on developmental assets, thriving, and most recently, developmental relationships. He leads the organization's work with families and is a lead creator of Keep Connected, Succe Institute's new family engagement resource. He holds a doctorate in education from the University of Minnesota, and he and his wife have 2 young adult, or not young, 2 young adult sons. So now I'll hand it over to Jean to get us started.
Great, it's great.
Wait, hold on.
Hi everyone, it's great to be with you. I'm delighted to join you today to talk about family engagement. I know many of you know Succe Institute, but just for those of you who may not be familiar with our work, we are a nonprofit organization based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our work is national and international. We have a vision of creating a world where all young people are valued and thrive. And we work do both applied research, which is a department I lead, really focusing on discovering what kids need to succeed in their families, schools, programs, and communities. And then we also provide tools and services to support individuals, partner organizations, and others in achieving better outcomes with young people. So that's really what we're focusing on today, is to thinking about the role of families and young people's development. To get us started, I want to just throw a question out, see who's joined us today. There's lots of different people in communities who work with families. And so I'd love to know from you, Janice will put up a poll here in a minute that you can answer. The question is, what is the primary setting in which you connect with, engage, or support families in your professional life? So we'll give you 4 choices: K-12 education, family serving organization, youth serving organization, faith community. And if there's something other than that that you work with families, put it in the chat box and so we can see it there. So Janice will put that poll up.
Okay, we're pretty much leveled off here. So if you want to quickly get in a vote, there we go. Okay. And can you see our results, Jean? Okay, so we have K through 12 education of 20%, family serving organizations 28%, youth serving organizations 46%, and the faith community 6%.
Great. A nice mix of folks. So we're glad to have you with us. Is my screen back? Not yet? Okay. So while we're waiting for that, let me just begin the conversation to tell you what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll get the screen back here in a minute. Somehow it's unhappy with us here, so. So, oh, sorry. Getting some help with the technical stuff. It's not responding. Check, quit. Force quit it? Okay. Can you guys still hear me? No, I think I'm gone. Okay. But it's, the GoToMeetings is gone. Yeah.
Okay, I think Gene's having to rework his screen here for just a minute. He has to reboot it, so he'll be back in just a minute. So I apologize for the technical issue. You can see that he's coming back on board here.
Am I back?
So while we're waiting here today, where's everybody joining us from? You want to put in the chat box where people are calling from?
So I'm not listed as a participant,
All right, we're just all over the U.S., California, Canada, Colorado, Rhode Island, Florida, Kentucky, Texas, Nebraska. Wow. Ontario, a couple from Canada. Wow. Great.
Should I try signing in again?
Still something's going wrong with Gene's screen today, so
Okay. There's progress.
all right. Phew.
Let me just get this going.
Thank you again, everyone, for being patient with us.
Okay. Am I back? Great. Okay. So we will not let technology get the best of us, and we'll keep moving here forward. I think I may skip the next poll just in case. So today we're just going to briefly talk about some of the challenges of engaging families, and then our core is really some shifts that I would suggest we might think about in terms of how to engage families in some fresh ways, and then how we've applied that finally in this new resource that we have called Keep Connected. So that's really where we're going to. Just to get us started, I wanted to just a slide from some of our data that we have at Search Institute from surveys of young people. This is the most recent data we've had from 122,000 young people. who are reporting on their parents' involvement in schooling, everything from helping with homework to showing up at meetings, and youth report. And all of you know this from experience. We're just showing it in a slide that in 6th grade, about half of the kids we surveyed said their parents involved in their school, and by 12th grade, it's down to 20%. And this is out of our data on developmental assets. We also see that some of the other patterns in families also are problematic, where kids in middle school, 6th grade, 72% saying that their parents say they love them. By the time they graduate, 45% of kids are saying that. And the idea there is that there's this disconnection that starts to happen, and we used to call it rebellion. It's simply not rebellion. There's kids trying to find their own voice, and as families and as schools, we're not always staying connected in the ways we might. And so that's sort of the challenge we're up against, and we see it as we talk with people in educational settings, community-based organizations, faith-based settings, family service organizations, where we say it's really easy, relatively easy to engage families when their kids are really little, and it gets harder and harder as their kids get older. So that's the challenge that we're taking on and thinking about. And I'm not going to do the poll just because of the technology challenge we might have again, but the poll, what I wondered about, and you guys can reflect on this and think about it, is why is it, what are the factors make a difference that make it the greatest challenge for engaging families as young people grow up and into middle school and adolescence? And these are some of the things I hear from people. It would be fun to see what you have on those, but if you have specific thoughts, feel free to add them. But we often hear people say families are too busy. Many families don't think they need help. They figure that, by the time their kids are 10, they kind of got this down. Sometimes transportation and logistics come up. It's too far. Families can't get here. All of those kind of things. Childcare is an issue. Those are barriers. And then oftentimes people say parents have other priorities. Families have other priorities. They're doing other things. And so there are many other challenges, and you may have some ideas about that, and you may have encountered some of those. And of course, then there's another underlying challenge is that families have really changed from the time many of our programs were designed. And the idea is that many of the programs, opportunities that we have, the question is, are they still relevant for, or even are they even off-putting to the diverse families that are in our communities today? So there's lots of dynamics potentially going on that get in the way. Some of the most interesting research I've seen is, and when I talk to people, it's these ideas that schedule, transportation, time, those are always the first things that come up about why it can be hard to get families to participate in things. When you look at some of the research, there's also another whole set of dynamics that come up around why families may not show up. And it's things like, if I go to a class on drug use, I might be judged, labeled, or they might diagnose me, or they might diagnose my kid because I showed up for something that's about a challenge we may be facing. Oftentimes parents will say, if something's wrong with a kid, it must be my fault. And so there's a sense of that shame that comes up. A loss of privacy. If I go to something, will I have to share data or information that maybe I'm not comfortable sharing? In that case, maybe there's a fear of consequence. If I show up, will I get deported? Will something else happen like that? If I sign in for a class, are there other consequences that I'll have to deal with? Maybe I just feel embarrassed or ashamed or feel like I failed, or I feel like I have to compete with the other parents and families. So all of these interpersonal dynamics. And the last one is, if I ask somebody else for help, then do I need to be able to help them? I'm not sure what I have to offer. So these are, when you talk with families, these are the kind of things they'll say are the underlying feelings and challenges that maybe they're struggling with that may make them say, well, maybe I don't really want to participate in something, or maybe I don't want to seek help because I may be worried about some of these dynamics. So our question is, the challenge is, how might we shape our engagement with families that also capitalizes on their strengths and their most powerful role in helping kids succeed? The idea being, is there something else going on that's not just focused on the challenges families face and the stresses and things, but how do we begin to tap the other stuff? And so that's really where we want to turn into, how might we rethink family engagement around some critical shifts that might happen. And if you look at your handout, if you have access to that, I think you have a link to download that. We have these listed on a whole sheet. I'm not going to summarize them first and go through them. I'll just go through them, and then we'll come back to see them all together. But these are 7 shifts that we've been thinking about for a while. And as I say on the handout, when we're talking about, it's a shift in emphasis, not a shift from one thing to another, where you stop doing everything you've been doing and do something else. And the other thing I often say when I talk about shifts is that some people are already doing the things that are in the column that we're recommending we need to move more toward in society. And so you have stories and examples and strengths to share with your colleagues in those areas. So we'll ask you to do that as we go along. So the first one is the idea that right now there's a lot of effort, a lot of emphasis where we either idealize families, it's the perfect thing, that families can do nothing wrong, or we pathologize them. One of the great researchers in family resilience is Froma Walsh, and several years ago in her really important book on strengthening family resilience, she looked at all the studies on families and said most studies tended to dismiss the families as hopelessly dysfunctional and seek positive extra-familial resources to counter negative impact. Thus, families were seen to contribute to risk and not to resilience. So the idea is if families are broken, what do they have to offer? How are they part of the solution? And so that's been an underlying narrative in many places. So we hear this idea families are broken and dysfunctional, and University of Virginia put out a poll of parents where 64% said that from the time their children to now, 64% of them say families have declined. And yet there's another narrative, there's a counter narrative to that. When you ask people, they'll all say family is the most important part of my life, and 75% of adults say they're very satisfied with their own family. That's from a Pew study of parents from 2015. So we kind of have an interesting story in summary where today's families are really messed up and nothing is more important to me than my own family. So there's this disjuncture between that. And our sense is that part of the ways we respond to that is to say, actually, families do have challenges and they're also adapting to a changing world and they have strengths that they're bringing to this. One of the great studies, I won't get into the backgrounds of it, was by Vern Bankston out at UCLA, and studying families in Los Angeles for about 30 years and across multiple generations. And what Vern found was that across all of these years, the families changed dramatically across, this was from the 60s into the 80s and 90s. And what he found was that despite all the changes in family structure, composition, and all of those things, families still matter greatly, and families can and do tend to perform well those functions that are particularly relevant to the lives of children, even in different social and historical contexts, household arrangements, and living conditions. So yes, families have challenges, the world is changing, families are changing, and yet families also have strengths that they're bringing and to cope with the world around them in new ways. So how do we begin rethinking of family engagement as a way of saying, hey, yeah, families are different, families are changing, families face challenges, and they have strengths that we can tap and nurture and develop. So that's the first shift. The second shift we talk about is a shift from recruiting families for our programs to building relationships with families. So we typically, I think, in many of our family programs, many of our efforts to engage families, we say, we start with the idea, we know what you need to know. We're the experts, we've been studying it, we know what you need to know. Maybe it's about school, maybe it's about faith, maybe it's about particular substance use issues. So we need to tell you that. Or if parents would just do this, then we can help them. Or sometimes we'll ask families, what do you need or what are you worried about, so we can program to or fix what you're dealing with. So the idea is we're the experts, we have the knowledge and resources, and that's where we start. And quite honestly, many families struggle with that and get frustrated with that, particularly if they say, well, you know, I'm doing okay, I don't necessarily need somebody to come tell me how to be a parent or how to be a family. And so how do we begin reframing that to building a relationship with family, to understanding their hopes, dreams, struggles, gifts, what life is like for them? Those are relational questions. How can we learn from and learn from each other and grow together? Families have something to offer to us, they have something to offer to other families. How do we learn from that? Um, with the goal being building trust and relationship and giving voice. And my sense is from seeing it happen is that if you have relationships with families and there's a trust that's built there, they're much more likely to participate. So again, you're not giving up on inviting families to be part of programs and services, but you're starting with relationships. Um, a really interesting study was done, a qualitative study in the UK, focused on families with children with mental health concerns. And they asked families what helps them, why do they ask for help? And this is about particular issues around medical practitioners and mental health practitioners. But as I looked at the list, I thought, isn't this true for so many of us? Families are willing and interested in talking with people who give them time to talk it out, who have that trusting relationship, who validate their concerns and listen to them and show interest in what's going on with the family. And so we've got a little checklist in the handout. We're not going to spend time with it here. Based on the work we'll introduce in a minute around developmental relationships, we're saying, what kinds of relationships do you have with families? And so how do we begin thinking about building relationships with families even as or before we start thinking about how we program and engage them in our programs? So that's shift number 2. Shift number 3 is shifting from a focus on our agenda to their agenda. So most of the time, family engagement efforts that I see are aimed at organizations accomplishing their mission, whether it's a school, a youth program, congregation, or other. So we have a grant to teach families about alcohol and drug prevention, so we're going to reach out to them to do that. Or we're really focused on third grade reading, so we're going to really focus on helping parents read in school. Again, nothing wrong with inviting and encouraging families to do those things, but it is our agenda, right? It's the things we want families to do. And we have to begin wondering, what are families working on? And the other piece is we know that families' greatest contribution to accomplishing the goals we have is for them to be strong and resilient as families. So when families have strong relationships, they're resilient, they have cohesion in the family, that actually is families that have those kinds of strengths and those are nurtured are most likely to be the ones who are engaging in the issues and are able to make a difference in the developmental goals, the educational goals we care about. So if it's true that family's greatest contribution lies in being a strong family, what does that mean for how and why we seek to engage families? So it's a question for us to begin thinking about is it an indirect but more powerful way to engage families by saying we actually want to help families be their best? And in the process of that, they'll be better positioned to be partners with us in the goals that we have as well that require family engagement. Fourth is a shift from a focus on parenting skills to a focus on family relationships. Parents hear a lot about the skills they need, want to have. There's books out there, there's lots of advice out there, there's people saying don't listen to any advice that's out there. And there's really, frankly, some great programs that focus on parenting skills. So again, parenting skills are important. We need to learn. There's a lot there. And even one of these books that's listed here is one that I wrote. So to say there's lots of good stuff out there on parenting skills, and it's valuable. And yet, what we're proposing is shifting to a focus on family relationships provides a unique and powerful opportunity for engaging families in a fresh way. This focus growth is tied to Search Institute's work we've been doing now for the last 3 or 4 years, really understanding the kinds of relationships young people need in their lives. What are the things that happen in relationships that help young people grow and thrive and learn? And so as we think about what kind of relationships kids need in their families, there are maybe 5 areas that we focus on in our work. We need parent-child relationships to be ones where kids and parents express care to each other. They know each other, cares about them, is looking out for them, and is listening to them, believes in them, and is warm, encouraging, all of those kind of caring things that we do for each other. And if you have the handout and you're following along, page 2 summarizes this framework. So express care is the first area that's a part of relationships and families, and frankly other relationships as well. Challenging them to grow is helping them, pushing them to be the best that they can be. whether expecting their best, holding them accountable, all of those things. Those are also things we do in relationships in our families. Providing support for each other, helping each other achieve goals and complete tasks. With very practical ways where it's everything from including them, empowering them, advocating for them, helping them navigate systems. For example, I think about young people who might have disabilities or learning challenges where the family is really advocating for them getting engaged and have the opportunities and the resources they need in their school or their youth program. Sharing power. This is the one that we have the most fun with families, talking about how do we learn in our families to treat each other with respect, to give each other a say, include people, let each other lead, collaborate, learn together. This is a dynamic in family relationships that becomes particularly powerful in early adolescence as kids are beginning to really find their own voice as emerging adults. And so that's the fourth area of relationships. And then finally, expanding possibilities, helping young people see and connect with people and possibilities and ideas that broaden their world. So the kinds of things that we might think about helping families nurture in relationships, how does that happen? And so if we trusted our technology, we'd ask you another poll. But as you think about the families you know, what do you think is most challenging of these to put in practice? And we'll look at some data here in a minute, so we won't spend time with a poll that might not work. So that's the framework. And so if that's the kind of relationships we want to help families nurture, how might we do that? How might we think about that? The other thing I would just note here is it's not just about what parents do for young people around these 5 elements, but it's about reciprocity in relationships. So as young people, if we work with young people, how they learn to express care to their parents in new ways, how they challenge their parents to grow and push them in areas, support their parents. I think about families that are new immigrants where the kids are often the translator and helping the parent navigate systems. So these are multiple layers to this. Expanding possibilities. I often talk about how my eldest son played drums and my youngest son played bassoon, and so we were introduced to all kinds of new kinds of music between the two of them. So the idea here is that in our relationships, they go both ways. So I just want to give you a little bit of data from a study we released a couple of years ago about relationships and families that was sponsored by Disney called Don't Forget the Families, and this is available online on our website. Essentially, 1,000 parenting adults with children aged 3 to 13 participated in the study, and it's a relatively diverse sample, quite diverse sample, with a third of the sample being, more than a third of the sample having income below $35,000 a year. So these are parents in America, in the United States. And so when we looked across the 5 elements in these families, we see that expressing care was most common, where the parents reached our threshold for measuring, saying that they were doing that fairly consistently, with sharing power and expanding possibilities being the least common in the families we surveyed. It's important to note that those differences were not because of race, ethnicity, that actually across the different racial ethnic groups, there's relatively similar levels of relationships across these 5 elements. And in fact, when we looked across different demographics groups, we found that the quality of relationships varied relatively little by parent education, family income, whether the family had 1 or 2 parents, whether the family was immigrant or non-immigrant family, the sexual orientation of the parent, or the parent's relationship to the child, whether they were adopted, grandparent, or birth parent. So again, the idea that all kinds of families can have these relationships. It is important to note that families that faced economic strain, where they were feeling like they were dealing with challenges, making ends meet, that tended to get in the way of relationships in this study. So I showed the overall patterns for the sample of parents with kids ages 3 to 13. When we asked a sample in a couple of communities of youth and adults about the same questions, we found that parents and kids had somewhat different perspectives on expressing care, challenging growth, and providing support. So it's interesting we can have a whole conversation around the idea, what's the difference between kids and parents? Is one right or wrong? Are they having different experiences? And what we're finding, and as we'll show later, engaging families in dialogue around these different elements can be a powerful way for families to get on the same page. So I've flown through how we think about developmental relationships. We do have a book that was released not too long ago, a couple of months ago, that you can download from our website, and you'll get a lot more of the research behind this framework and some ideas for how you can use the framework. So that's the focus on family relationships, and that's really at the core of Search Institute work. So I took a little longer with that one than some of the other shifts. So that was shift number 3. Shift number 4 is we have, for lots of good reasons, put a lot of energy into early childhood and parenting in early childhood. And again, I don't want to undermine the power of parenting in the first 3 years, first 5 years, the importance of early childhood programs. And yet, I think we also need to remember that kids continue to grow after they turn 5, and family relationships change throughout time. And in fact, Child Trends did a really interesting survey of the research on parent-child relationships in adolescence, and basically found that the quality of parent-child relationships is one of the most important factors in determining the behaviors and outcomes that adolescents adopt across the domains of their life. So again, relationships matter well into adulthood. And so we begin to think about it as, what are the big transitions that families face? Our work, as we'll talk about in a minute, focuses on the transition into middle school and adolescence. But there are many other transitions when you might engage families, whether when they move, when their families experienced other major change, such as a death or a change in marital status, or any of those kinds of things, or lots of different things. A birth of a new child, obviously, is a huge transition. So how do we begin to understand that parenting continues through at least the first 25 years? I have a almost 27-year-old, and we're still being parents. So how do you begin to understand how parenting changes and how family life and family relationship change as young people grow up? And how do we support families in that journey? The next shift focuses on moving from a focus on helping individual families on their own to engaging families in connected communities. And I love this quote that just sort of summarizes the challenge from Gary Melton, who was in South Carolina when he did this research. They looked at a whole ongoing study of families in rural South Carolina, and their conclusion was that social poverty or social isolation and a lack of easy access to help has become rampant regardless of the family's socioeconomic status. To a large extent, help has become a commodity that people buy, not what they do. And so the idea here is that people don't necessarily have places to turn for help or connected communities. And what has happened is they tend to rely on sometimes no one. In some of our studies, we found that half of parents said they had no one they could turn to about parenting challenges. But oftentimes it's just they're just on their own. If they've moved a lot, they may not have neighbors that they know, and so all of these kind of things. So families are too often going it on their own. And I think sometimes what we do is we think, well, we as our program need to connect with each family to help each family do their thing, which is kind of the spoke model on the left side of the chart. And how do we begin thinking about it more as a network model? How do we embed families in a web of relationships where they're connected with others who are on the journey with them, alongside them, so that they can learn with and from each other? And one way to think about that is when some studies have looked at how the same study looking at how families engage in mental health stuff. They began to ask why do families show up? And it's very simple things. And the reason I put this one here was, will there be parents like me in this situation? Will they show up, people who are like me? How will I be treated by other people? And can I be successful in doing this? So parents, again, connecting in a web of relationships where they feel like they have something to contribute and where they can be successful. The last shift I want to highlight is a shift from serving families to empowering families. Several years ago, we did a study where we asked families about how they're connected in their communities. We asked about a series of informal supports about who was in their neighborhood and how well they knew their neighbors. Their participation in organizations such as many of those organizations that we're part of around schools, faith-based organizations, youth-serving organizations, community-based organizations. How are they participating in those things? And then finally, how they're contributing to their community through the civic life of the community, through volunteering, voting, being active in the community. And then we looked at which of those are most tied to young people's outcomes. And in other words, which ones most matter for young people's well-being. And what was striking about it was the area of that far outshone the others was that when families were engaged as leaders and contributors and seen as serving their community, that had by far the greatest relationship in these regression analyses compared to any of the other forms of community connection. And so we put a lot of our energy into building those formal connections and getting families involved in our institutions. And the questions become, how do we begin tapping, encouraging, inviting families to see themselves as resources to the community and to each other, and how powerful that is as an opportunity to help young people grow and thrive. So I've talked a whole bunch here, and I'm going to maybe give a chance for you to fill in some thoughts on the in the chat box. And so just as you look at these 7 shifts, what's one idea that you have that, as you listen to that, you thought could be particularly powerful in your situation? And I wonder if someone on the team can just highlight a few of those, just to get a sense of what people are thinking about as they pop up.
Sure, Jean, thank you. So if you want to put your answer in the chat box, I will see here what we have. Let's see, Sharon says through transitions. Okay. Let's see, strength and resilience, Sharita said. Family relationships, Jamie said. Connected communities or empowering families. And a lot of empowering families out there. Travis said, our family's greatest help may not even be the school or organization, but rather it may be another family that we bring them together with.
Great.
Connected communities, yeah, through transitions, quite a few of them here.
Well, it sounds like different parts of these connect with different people, which is wonderful to hear and what we wanted to know. So thank you for putting those ideas in, and if you can continue doing that while I jump into the next section. So what I wanted to do now is to just introduce to you the program we've been developing that's trying to put these principles into practice, these shifts into practice. It's called Keep Connected, and it's now available. We're actually offering in the end of July, first couple of days in August, a leadership institute for people who want to adopt this resource where you can come together and learn about it. We'll talk about that at the end of this webinar, but I just want to walk through what we've tried to do and how it's connected to all of this. And by the way, all the pictures in here are from our pilot sites. We've spent the last couple of years working with several sites, what I'll show. So as we were designing this, we had these shifts in mind, and there was a series of things that we did to try to do this. We emphasize it's a no blame, it's strength-based. People have a chance to do that, to tell their own stories in terms of building relationship with each other. We focused on their priority. Our sense is that in the families we talked with is that when kids are entering adolescence, that there's a lot of anxiety about how they'll stay connected to and what's going to happen with their young person. And so tapping a little bit of that anxiety to say, well, no, let's come together and talk about how we can do this, how we can stay connected during adolescence is a big part of it. We originally were thinking of designing Keep Connected as a program for parents, and as we talked with our partner sites and others and looked at the literature, we decided, no, we really need to do this as a 2-generation model where we're bringing kids and parents together, modeling relationships, learning, focusing on talking about relationships. It's focused, as I mentioned, on early adolescence. It's really social learning theory put into practice around building connections among the families who participate. And we didn't do as much of it along the way yet, but we're actually beginning to see the families who participate in the first time we go through this begin to get ready to, and want to facilitate their own groups as they move forward. So our goal is to have a way of thinking about these shifts and putting them into practice. Um, we operated this pilot across the last 2 years in 6 communities that are listed here across the United States, and there are a variety of organizations, including many of the ones that are reflected here. We worked in a public school, an educational support program that worked in schools, a low-income housing community, a community collaboration, family service organization, community-based organization, and by the way, one of the community-based organizations was actually a faith-based organization. So the basic model of Keep Connected is a very simple one, and it's similar to some other models that are out there. Families come together for a series of 6 workshops and a graduation. They have a meal together. Youth and the parents split off into separate sections talking about similar content, then come back together to do some activities together for the second half. And then there's stuff they can do at home. So the idea here is we're surfacing issues, trying some things together, and then practicing them and talking about them at home. So that's the basic structure of it. Pretty simple structure, but it works. And it's through, as I said, 6 interactive workshops and then a graduation. And it really just walks families through, gives them experiences and activities to explore each of the elements of developmental relationships as we described them and listed them. When we talk to pilot sites, we've now gone in 2 rounds of piloting, prototyping and piloting. And what we found is that the families who participated in this focus on relationships, it was hard, by the way, it's hard to get families to show up because they were afraid they were going to be blamed. Many would say, actually, what have I done wrong that I need a parenting program? And so there's a lot of presumption that if you're being asked to participate in a parenting or family program, something must have been wrong. And so the organizers would have to say, no, actually, that's not the issue at all. We're inviting you to do something so you can be proactive about the next phase of life that you're entering as your kid moves into middle school and adolescence. So what they found, and we did focus groups and interviews at the end, as well as some other feedback in each of the sites, that the parents who participated said they didn't feel judged. They felt like it tapped their strengths. They loved having dinner together. For many of them, it was one of the few meals they had together during the week. And the idea that facilitator disclosure is key. So again, the idea that the facilitators telling their own stories, in some ways being vulnerable, building a relationship, creating a more trusting space for the families. And so you can see some of the quotes around this, and I'm not going to read them all. You can see those. But the idea across the time that they really got excited about the sharing power piece. Even the parents did. Kids loved it, by the way. That was kind of their thing in the places where we worked. But the families also began to see the value of talking about it and recognizing the value of the reciprocity. Oftentimes parents would say, I began to see that it wasn't just all about me, it was about being a family and being in relationship together, and that my kid, I should expect them and to offer things. And one of the stories, I was in one of our sites, and the powerful story of a mom saying, or the daughter saying, excuse me, I didn't know it mattered to my mom that I told her that I appreciated what she was doing for me. And so just a little expression of care for the 6th grader to say to her mom, who was struggling and dealing with real challenges in life, really mattered to that mom. So to open the space for families to dialogue about that kind of thing. We asked them what had changed, so way families grew, and so at the end of the sessions, they were talking about communication being better, a lot of focus on how are we making decisions differently in our family, how are we spending more time together. We try to have throughout the workshop series activities they can also do at home. So a one that many families use, some organizations also use, is the idea of sharing highs and lows over a meal. What was your high today? What was your low? We model that in each session so they get practice at it, and then they try it at home. And so it's a way to open up conversations. And so again, you can see young people and parenting adults highlighting some of those things in their feedback. We did do in the last session, we did ask for feedback on the sessions, and data from parents and youth, again, is about 30 of each in the most recent round of feedback. Um, Largely, we're saying there's a lot of good stuff happening here. That these things happened a lot or some. Not surprisingly, it's harder to get kids to be enthusiastic after they've been in school all day about a session. We continue to work on that and continue to work with facilitators to ensure that the sessions are as engaging as possible for the young people themselves. So, but it's pretty important to me anyway that 94% of parents who participated said the information was important to them. A lot of very important. So all of this comes together in a series of tools we've created. The Keep Connected Institute that's coming up, where you learn how to run the program and get facilitation skills, an online implementation toolkit. Each of the 6 sessions, it has detailed facilitator sessions for how to do everything, and handouts that are ready to reproduce in both English and Spanish for the parent handouts, and then the other tools. We're also developing a survey that's available for use for tracking how families are doing around relationships for organizations that want to do a more rigorous evaluation or get more rigorous baseline data. So if you want to learn about Keep Connected, we do have the Institute coming up July 31st to 2nd. I will be leading that with one of the facilitators from one of our pilot sites who did a great job of coordinating this, so there'll be real world experience guiding the Leadership Institute. Our encouragement is to have teams come so that you have maybe a coordinator, a couple of facilitators. When you're signing up, that would be ideal so that you can really hit the ground running with leading it. Our goal in the Institute is for you to be ready when you leave to begin inviting families, getting to know families, and leading the Institute yourself, or leading the workshops yourself in your own communities as early as you're ready to do that. So you'll have everything you need by the time that's over. So that's the content I wanted to highlight. I'm hoping there's some questions, dialogue, things we can talk about here for the next several minutes.
Thanks so much, Jean. Yeah, we'd like to use the next few minutes to answer some of the questions from the audience. So if anybody has already sent in questions, we'll get to those, but there's still some time now to submit some if you have them, and we'll get to as many of them as we can before the end here. So, one of the questions was, well, this has been asked a few times. Will there be a recording sent out? Yes, we are going to record that. We are recording the webinar, and there'll be a recording sent out probably tomorrow. And another question is the age of the youth.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. The Keep Connected is
I don't know if you want
designed
to address that, or if you want me to.
for middle school, upper elementary. I think the activities would be harder to pull off with with younger children, so that's really the sweet spot. It's really designed for families in that transition into middle school and adolescence, when it's not just a change in developmental changes that are happening when kids are 10, 11, 12, but also the shift in from, for example, multiple elementary schools into one middle school and a different class structure and all of those kind of things. So it's really designed for that age group. If there's something else you're wanting to do, we could talk about. I'd be happy to answer questions about whether it might be appropriate for other settings.
Great. And Laura is asking, can we use the Keep Connected materials even if you cannot attend the Institute?
Keep Connected is a package that's designed to be part of the Institute. This will not be the last time we will offer that Institute. So if you're interested and can't come to this one, let Mary know and we will get you on the waiting list for the next time.
Great, and that actually answers Sonia's question as well.
There are materials for families on our website, Parent Further. So if you just want some materials and activities, there are some things on the website that you can access.
Okay, and here's another question. What's your suggestion for parents who are resistant to help or feel undermined or belittled by those types of presentations or trainings?
I think that, to me, that goes back to how do you build relationships and how do you begin to understand and listen to their stories. And highlight. So I think there's that piece around getting to know their stories and um, highlighting for them the strength you see, even if it says, wow, you're really coping with some major challenges. I'm impressed that you've been able to do X, and beginning to build trust, because it really is about them building some trust in you. The other thing I would say is if there are other families who have you've been able to engage with and participate in, is connecting them with some other folks who've been through some of those challenges as a way to, again, build trust and to be able to say, no, if you show up and participate in some of these workshops, no, you're not going to be judged. It's an opportunity to tell your own story and open up where you want to.
Okay. Marianne said, of course it's better to start young, but most parents we see don't come for service until things are very serious with their teens, drug and alcohol issues, not going to school, etc. Is there a way do you have some way you can address that?
Right. So I will say that Keep Connected itself is not designed as an intervention program. There are other programs out there that are specifically designed if there's a serious issue to intervene in that issue. That said, I think that um, you could utilize Keep Connected as a resource for those families if they're saying, because at some level you've got to deal with those issues and you have to deal with healing the relationships. Um, we do have, by the way, the option in Keep Connected, which is I don't think is ideal given the power of the two-generational model. But if you're only able to engage parenting adults for various reasons because of the strains in the family, you can actually do Keep Connected just with parenting adults to help them think through how they're relating to their kids, what they want with their kids, and they can then take that home. So that we've worked with some folks who said we're just not ready to bring them together. There's too much strain in the relationship. There's not enough trust in the parent-child relationship, frankly. And so it's a way to have them begin thinking about not how do we solve all those problems, but how do I reconnect with my child um, and focus there. So, but it's to me, it comes back to yes, you need the specific um, tools and skills that might be through counseling, through other specific programs to deal with those particular challenges, and a focus on rebuilding relationships can be complementary to that.
Great. Let's see, Sharon asks, how did you recruit families? Recruitment is a challenge for our lab. Families are very busy. Yes, indeed.
Yes, so inviting, engaging families is challenging. Um, And so we worked with 6 different sites who all tried different things. In some cases, it was very hard. Um, and so what we know was the most powerful was when there were people who were in the school or program who knew the families and who could personally invite them. Again, the program is, I didn't say this, the program is designed for families of 8 to 10 to 12. So it's not designed to attract 500 families. It's designed to invite a small group of families to come together and learn together. So just to put some perspective on that, in some cases, some of the pilot communities were able to get 2 or 3 families the first time. And so again, very small. But what began to happen is then word of mouth can begin kicking in of families inviting families. Inviting families to anything new triggers some of those questions about who else is going to be there, am I going to be judged, is it a safe place, all of those things. So building the, again, going back to building the relationship with the families, giving them trust that it can be a place to go, will all be good. The other thing is we are finishing up right now a tool, a video that is aimed um, at parents as a recruitment tool for parents who participate in Keep Connected, which features the experiences of the youth and parents who've participated in the pilot. So if you're doing Keep Connected, you would have access to this tool to then use as part of here's what it's all about and here's what other families have experienced in it. So again, you're trying to lower the sense of risk and the sense of vulnerability of what families showing up. So I don't know, I hope there's some things in there that you get to. The last thing I'll say is If you try using flyers and emails as your only method, it will not work. Those can reinforce
Okay.
people showing up, but it will not by itself. Some places worked hard at um, getting inviting families and then following up with text messages and other things. Some families use incentives. Um, um, that had mixed results, frankly. So again, it depends on your families and the situations. I think the one strategy that almost always works best is building the relationships and letting them know that you would value their participation because you think they have something to offer to the group.
Great, great. I might want to add too that with when you purchase there, when you make a decision to go to the Institute, you do get online resources that will help you market, including videos that
Yep.
you can use. We also have some flyers and that sort of thing too, which are, as Jean was saying, probably not as powerful, but definitely helpful when in the recruiting process.
Yeah,
So.
they're great reinforcements. Yeah.
Um, So let's see if we can have one more question here. I'm a guidance counselor at a middle school. Would it be possible to get locations where those workshops would be available for families at my school if the school cannot facilitate the workshops? And I think you can answer this, or I think we would like to also to put make available on our website, on our parentfurther.com website, a list of the participating locations later on. But I don't know if you want to add
Yeah,
something to
I
that.
think that's going to be a matter of building the network of folks who are using it, and if they're interested in, if you can find facilitators who are interested in a community and offering it in partnership with schools, I think that's a great way to go. Search Institute is not um, we're not intending to offer direct service to families of doing the 7 workshops ourselves. I think it becomes cost prohibitive for everyone to have Search Institute facilitators out in the field for 7 workshops. And the other thing I would say is then you also don't have the opportunity to build the kind of relationships and trust that happens in a small group.
Right. Okay. Okay, so I think we're getting close to the top of the hour here, and we do have our 3 books that we want to give out, so to attendees. Um, let's see here. Um, Here, I'll just go ahead and choose 3 here. How about, let's see here. Just randomly picking these. So uh, Amy, Amy Berquist,
Yay!
yay.
Seems like we should cheer.
Debbie Ramirez, yay.
Yay!
And let's see here. Just pulling one here. Uh, Sue Christensen, or Christian.
Yay!
Yay. So there we go. So thanks so much for joining us here today. If you have any questions, you can continue to go ahead and email me, I think, or Mary. Actually, Mary would be the better choice. She knows she can answer all the questions. That's Mary S. at search-institute.org. And we just appreciate you spending your time with us today. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.